My name is Joyce Adhiambo. I come from Kibera. I'm a mother of 3, and out of those 3, I have 2 who are deaf. One is a girl, the other is a boy. All of them are in school, and right now, whatever I'm doing, I do bakery to support my family.
My name is Christine Kirui. This is my sign name. I am a deaf mother of 3 boys. In my family, there is no deaf person. I'm the only one. We have 5 children, 1 girl and 4 boys. I'm the only one who is deaf. But my husband's side of the family, we are a big deaf family because I have 2 brothers-in-law who are deaf, 1 sister-in-law who is deaf, and also a niece who is deaf. So the in-law family, we are a big deaf family. Hello, my name is Hannah Wanja. This is my sign name. I am deaf. I grew up deaf. In my primary school, I learned with the hearing students. There was a challenge there because of the communication barrier. Later, as I grew up, my parents will see and not understand me. Another challenge was access to learning. So my parents moved me to a deaf school. I learned at Kambui School for the Deaf, based in Kiambu County. I finished primary and joined a secondary school in Nyeri County, which is signed as Narumoro School for the Deaf. When I was done at the Narumoro High School, I went on to learn teaching at Machakos Teaching College. Currently, I'm a teacher of deaf children at Kambui School for the Deaf. I am married with 3 children. All are girls. My husband is deaf, and I thank God for this family. Thank you.
Actually, the second child who is deaf, who is partially deaf, it was not an easy journey because most of the time I could not admit that she was deaf until I took her to school. That's when the teacher called me and said that, oh, Mama Oprah is not hearing. And I failed to understand, oh, what are you telling me? I can't imagine that. Because at home we could talk, but so after the teacher told me that she can't hear, that's when I came to realize at home when she turns back, if you call her, she doesn't respond. So, but it took me time. I couldn't accept. So I removed her from that school and took her to another school. So there she was learning very well. It wasn't that bad because the first one was a city council school, and the second one was a private school. So you know, in private school, the teachers are there for your child. So that's where I started seeing that she's doing well. So I couldn't accept that she doesn't hear. That's how it was. And the third one, now with him, he was profound deaf. I took her to a hearing school, but it wasn't. So I just kept him home for like 4 years because I could not accept in my mind. And again, getting school for the deaf children is not easy. So it took me a while and I delayed him going to school. That's another challenge we have.
As I grew up in a hearing family, I really struggled a lot, including going to a hearing school, because at that time my parents were not aware of any deaf schools. I struggled in the hearing school. I got a lot of challenges there because I could not hear. The teachers there tried to slightly understand me, but not always. Some teachers would beat me for no reason because they thought I was pretending to be hearing. But I thank God for the patience I had until I completed my schooling well. Okay, I was not born deaf. I think at the age of 9 years old, that time I was in class 3, I was sick with malaria. And before that time, I was communicating and interacting well with my family. But when it happened, I suffered a hearing loss. My world changed. Communication became a problem. My parents would use pen and paper. First time, my parents thought, including the neighbors, that I was pretending. How could I not hear? It was a big challenge, the area of communication. My parents wondered what to do with me. They took me to the village to my grandmother to stay there. Remember, I was now not in school and it was impossible to communicate. I couldn't learn. My parents were sourcing for a school with no success. I stayed at home possibly for 2 months as they looked for a school. My aunt happened to work for a deaf school in Kiambu County. They asked if she could help me to get that school from home because I was deaf. So I was taken to that school. They conducted an ear assessment confirming I was deaf and needed to stay in that school to learn. But a big problem arose, communication. Before I used to speak well, now I've moved to the deaf world. I had to start learning sign language. It was a big challenge. The deaf would tap my shoulder and communicating using signs, but I did not understand. They were patient with me, scribbling on my arm, signing the alphabets, words, sentences. I learned slowly. I learned sign language, but back at home, communication was a challenge as my parents did not know sign language. At school, I'm learning sign language. Going home, they want to communicate through lip reading. Trying to balance the two, my mind was confused. Finally, my parents, who did not know sign language, tried to use a few village signs. I too tried to teach them a few signs. I also taught a few signs to my brother and sister. They could communicate with me, but it was difficult for my parents. We tried to communicate, we would get stuck because they felt that this was a new language. When I became deaf, my parents did not accept me. They felt this was new. They could not accept me as a deaf child. They visited churches for me to be prayed for, laying of hands on my ears to be opened, hoping that the next day I will hear. But it happened that I still stayed deaf and not hearing. Much later on, my parents having taken me to a deaf school, so the deaf are like other hearing children, could learn, they could do this. But my parents slowly accepted me, and from there, my parents started supporting me, paid for my school fees to complete my education. We try to communicate. They love and support me very well.
So from there, being that the second born, the third born, I was to take him to school. So I went to another school. It was called the Greenhouse. They were starting with the baby class. So before you join that school, you have to go through the hospital, give the letter that says that the child is deaf. So I went to Kenyatta Hospital, and by the time I was going to Kenyatta Hospital, I had to take the two of them. So they went for screening. That's when I came to accept that he has a disability for hearing. But still, I couldn't take her to deaf school. So I just leave her there in a private school, a hearing school. And the boy, I took him to a deaf school.
Thank you. I'm married and my husband is deaf. Our challenge is like when I was pregnant. I know I was pregnant, but we did not know what to expect from the pregnancy journey. It was difficult. Also, the hospital visits and the need to communicate with the doctor. The doctor does not know sign language to prepare you as a soon-to-be mom. From the experience that I learned in school, the world was the hearing, interacting with other mothers, sharing their experiences. Sometimes it was challenging. When I was pregnant with my firstborn, I tried to progress on with a hearing pregnancy. After giving birth, the communication, sometimes the baby is crying, you want to know what happens to babies. Sometimes the baby is sick, you want to know why the baby is sick. You take them to the hospital, tests need to be communicated with the doctor, what transpired. You need to have an interpreter to know the baby's problem. Before all this, when you're pregnant, there are private matters not possible for you to share with another person. You bring an interpreter who's hearing your problems, private affairs. Maybe you're sick, it could be a cesarean section issue, an infection which is private, but now there is no other way. You bring an interpreter, sometimes you feel embarrassed, but you accept to inform the interpreter for you. I really thank God. Why? When giving birth to my hearing children, there were challenges when communicating. Sometimes the child may not understand you clearly. Why? Their language is spoken. With a hearing child, but I'm deaf, you can both communicate. But if the child wants to say something, but the mother does not understand, I'll do the opposite. I became deaf, my parents are hearing, but now I'm deaf, my children are hearing, you see? As the child grows, their first language is sign language. Why? I'm deaf, my child must talk. So I teach them sign language. If they want to use the washroom, they will tap me and mom. They want to use the toilet. If they want food, they point, they want to eat. Their first language is sign language. But for the hearing community, speech. Deaf child's local language is the opposite. I use sign language, my child uses spoken language. We must learn from how to communicate from myself. This makes the hearing think I'm deaf, also that my child is deaf. They're confused as to who is truly deaf between the two of us. Later, they hear the child speaking. Also at the same time, my parents felt I cannot communicate. They felt it was best they take my child to teach them how to talk. Because they said when I would sign, my child likewise will copy the signs. So they were wondering how their future will be. That was my parents' worry. I told them to leave me alone. I will communicate with my child. By the time the child grows big, you'll be proud. Why? They can communicate with me, communicate with my husband, the children, and others. If a problem arises, for example, if it's raining, or they hear a knock on the door and sign for you, Mom, there's a knock on the door, it helps. Or when they hear a rainfall, they signal you, Mom, it's raining, or Dad. They can communicate very well. I feel proud. Why? The children can interpret for us. Before a challenge, you always look for an interpreter. When the child is sick, you go to the hospital, you don't need to look for an interpreter. You call the child to lead you. They ask, are you sick? You answer yes. The child can explain to the doctor why you're sick. The child will talk with the doctor that you're sick. It could be headache or stomach pains. The doctor notes this down And when done, now the child is speaking on behalf of the doctor, explaining to the mom this and that. The child becomes my interpreter. Mom, the doctor has said that take medicine, buy this and this. You feel proud. They're interpreting for me. Compare this before, when the parents experience their world with communication. There's no sign language within the family, where parents are deaf and the children are hearing. So you feel proud that they interpret for you very well. In my family, I believe I feel very comfortable, because now we have deaf who understand me better, including having a deaf society, because we are many deaf there. No one can make me bored when I'm in the deaf society. The deaf are there, and I feel better and very comfortable, because I have a big deaf family. When we go home for the holidays, we meet all the family there. We tell stories, make fun, catch up all the time. Stories and stories and stories. You don't get bored. I feel better at the same time being in the deaf society. I have 3 hearing children, young boys, but they're learning sign language. How are they learning sign language? As they grow, maybe 4 or 5 months, they see us as their parents, me and the father, signing, and their eyes move back and forth between the two of us. So that motivates them to learn sign language, including an awareness that their parents are deaf. So it makes them feel that their parents can understand them better.
Actually, I can't say it's bad, because all of us, we know sign language. Because at Greenhouse School for the Deaf, the school offered parents a sign language class, so we could go every Saturday. And you see, every Saturday there's no school, so I could take all the children with me. We learned sign language, my firstborn child and the secondborn as well. So in that sign language class, all of us could learn sign language. So we are okay with it. We know sign language. We communicate with the profound child, who is the thirdborn. Learning sign language has helped me so much, because I'm able to talk to my child in sign language, and she understands me very well. We can talk about sexual education and many others. One of them, you see, we have changes in our bodies. As a girl, you see breast coming. The other thing is that menstruation, and you can be able to talk to her to avoid this and do this in order to achieve what is coming tomorrow. Same to the boy child. We don't neglect them. You tell them, at your age now, start doing this and this. And once you know sign language, he'll be keen on listening to what you're saying. And if you don't know, you see, he'll just be there.
Yes, in future, I can empower my children to understand about sex education, because now they are young, 4.5 years, 2.5 years, and 7 months. But I believe in future I will empower them to know and understand about sexual education very well. My firstborn daughter is now in class 8. We both discuss. My daughter and I are friends. My daughter, we are both open with one another when she has a problem or a challenge. I remember the first time my daughter began her period. I knew how to explain. And luckily, we both had talked about it. When you start your periods, don't be silent. Please inform me. And the time when your period starts, you need this and this and this. Also, no playing with boys. Tested how she can use a sanitary pad. I taught her how to place it. So my daughter was aware. So the first time her period started, she was in school. At the same time, I'm close with the teachers. If my daughter started her period, we had talked about this and this and this. So also you please explain the same. So we both work together to support my daughter. When she comes back home, she asked, Mom, you know what? My periods have started. And I'll ask which month. The daughter will respond with the month and the date. Then I'll ask her, do you know when to expect your next period? She says, I don't know. So we both sit together and learn how to count. So now my daughter knows how to count her days. We are both open. Anytime she has a problem or a challenge, she comes and talks to me. My second born daughter is in class 5. I've already taught her. She knows everything. How to take care of her life, not to play with boys, to be open if she has any challenge out there, to feel free to talk to us as her parents, even including the father. Most of the times about the girl child, the key is to inform, discuss, and see how to solve and help out. My last born daughter is in PP2. She also knows. When she went to school, I asked the teacher what happened, because she came back home and told me, Mom, one child there pinched me, so tomorrow come to school and warn this child. So we are both free with each other. I encourage them to work hard, the deaf mothers to encourage my children in future on how to become independent. Okay, thank you for that question. As a teacher, I feel that the biggest gap is the communication barrier. Why? Many parents do not know sign language. When you give birth to a child and the child becomes deaf, or you give birth to a deaf child and you're married, the mother many times is a mother who loves to support the child. But oftentimes you find the fathers, if they see that the child is deaf, they withdraw and leave the mother to care for the baby. When the child becomes big, or the opposite is true, the father can love the child, but the mother feels, I cannot have a deaf child, and runs away, leaving the father. So the situation is the same for the both. When the child grows, communication is a problem. Some parents feel it could be a curse, others feel it could be family genetics. So as the child grows, they grow without communication. Some parents feel neglected, there's no need to care for the child. When they go for an ear assessment at the hospital, you contact the doctor who says that the child needs to be taken to a deaf school. Yes, they're taken to a deaf school, but many parents, because of the communication barrier, when the schools close for the holidays, they don't feel that they should bring their children back home. Why? One, they have not learned sign language. This child feels the need to be included in the family, but you have other children there. Maybe you have one child who is deaf and the other 3 are hearing. So the mother will focus more on the hearing children. They will talk, interact, laugh. The deaf child is on their own. Many times they will feel oppressed. Why? They're not involved in the communication. When this child resumes school, they feel that this is my world, because the communication is there. The teacher loves me, supports me, does everything for me. So whenever schools close, they're not motivated to go back home. Why? There is no communication. The parents themselves feel that this child has now closed school. If they come home, how do we communicate? How do we support? They feel they're not ready to go back and pick their child. Some extend 2 weeks or even 1 month. The child stays until the schools reopen. The child is still there. Why? The parents believe it could be a curse. Maybe they believe the children will be a nuisance. There will be no peace in the family. And when the child is sidelined, you communicate with the hearing children, talk with them, show love, the deaf child feels neglected. So what happens? The child is stressed and they bottle all this stuff inside, and this could end up in depression. Some may even feel like they would want to commit suicide. They feel that my parents hate me, they do not love me. Some parents will also give their child access to their phone, so the child will be on the phone, on tomorrow maybe the TV. So what happens to the child's mind? You know this, the child must grow in stature. I'm a girl, my parents are hearing. I'm a deaf girl. So at puberty, I start having my periods. I want to talk with my mother about periods. And in future, this girl may want to marry. And you need to teach and explain all these things. Other people there in the society will feel possibly to use her in a bad way. How will the father and mother protect this girl if they do not know sign language? I encourage the parents, it will be good to learn sign language. Also be a friend to your deaf child. Be a friend to your son. Be a friend to your daughter. Care and protect them. If you have the language, it will be easy to communicate to accommodate these children. But if there is no sign language, the society will look at the child and some will misuse them. And this will ruin the child's life. My encouragement is first, language. You learn. It will be possible to communicate with the child and you can support your child. Education is important. Give your child an education and in future they'll become independent, possibly stand on their own. But if they completed their education, they get a job, they'll be able to do everything themselves. But if you hold them back, the child will not have support for their future life. Also, the society needs to accept the deaf children, support adults who have jobs, use communication, teach, learn sign language, and support them. In future, they can be independent society of the deaf and the parents of deaf children to stand and support their children. Thank you. Deaf mothers can celebrate Mother's Day because we are the same. We receive the same challenges. The only difference is the hearing. Parents have a few challenges. With the deaf mothers, they have more challenges for their children because when you have a hearing child grow, for deaf mothers, they face a lot of challenges there because maybe sometimes the baby is crying, it is impossible for you to hear. But the celebration should be the same. Not all mothers have children who can call you mother like the hearing. There is no difference. Only the problem is just that we cannot hear. Happy Mother's Day to all deaf mothers. Also mothers to deaf children. Happy Mother's Day. I love you.